Hi, my name is Joanna Fallon, I'm a graphic designer, and today we're going to be creating a logo for a fictional skate footwear company using the Bison font by Ellen Luff. Bison is a strong, modern sans serif font that comes in 4 different weights and also 2 outline styles. Being such a dramatic, powerful font, it lends itself really well to print, headlines and branding, and in this video we're going to be covering the thought process behind coming up with a logo design for a fictional skate footwear brand called GU and a magazine advert for them as well. Before we start going through the design though, let's take a quick look at the typeface itself. I'm on the Design Cuts product page, and as you can see it's a strong, striking font, given extra versatility by having these 6 different font weights that come in italic versions as well. The good thing about having all these different styles within the same font family is that you can mix and match them in your design work to create visual interest and also be reassured that they're going to all complement each other really well. It's also worth mentioning this is an all caps font and it comes with extensive language support, so you can hopefully use it for clients almost anywhere in the world. Going back to the finished design, let's say we've been approached by GU, a new skate footwear brand, to come up with a logo design for them. Now, before we start thinking about anything like colours, shapes, typefaces, what we need to establish is the brand space or the brand positioning. In other words, how is this brand different from its competitors, and where or how will it sit in its target market's minds? In order to establish this as designers, what we need to understand is what their customers want, what the brand is offering, and how their competitors are positioning themselves. We then need to take this information and encapsulate it into a visual representation that's going to resonate with their target audience, reflects what the brand is offering, and also sets them aside from their competitors. A great way to establish this is to ask your client how they would describe themselves in 3 words, which is actually a lot harder than you'd imagine. So let's ask our client GU, whose name comes from the Japanese word for freedom. And they've said bold, dynamic, no fuss. Now this is great because these are really clear definitions. So they've said that they want to be seen as bold, so it's probably they want to be seen as making a statement, doing things differently and standing out. Dynamic, because they're a skate footwear brand, it's activewear, it needs to come across as high energy and able to facilitate that kind of lifestyle for their target audience. And finally, no fuss suggests that they want to be quite minimalist, they do what they do well, and there's no unnecessary extras. And this is quite interesting to use with their name being Japanese, because quite a recognisable Japanese aesthetic is quite kind of Zen minimalism. So that's something we can perhaps consider during the design process. Next, we need to find out who their main competitors are. And no surprise, these are quite well-established skate footwear brands. So we've got Vans, Converse, DC, Supra, Etnies, Nike or Nike, and Adidas. Now that we've established how GU want to come across and we know who their main competitors are, let's take a look at their logos so we can get a better idea of how they're presenting themselves and positioning themselves within the market. Now, one of the big similarities that's standing out between all of these is that they're all very heavily type-based, and it's like big, strong, chunky type as well, and they almost all include an icon. The exception really being Vans, but that also includes a very stylized V, and they did used to have this more graphic icon-based logo as well, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. Quickly going back to this Vans logo, the V is heavily stylized, but it's quite cleverly done because the way it extends out here gives a sense of movement and direction and flow. Kind of subtle slope at the end of it kind of makes it look like it's pointing, it's going somewhere, and gives it some direction. This sense of movement and dynamism within the logo is also used in a couple of these other brands. The Nike logo, for example, which is probably one of the most famous logos in the world, has that very famous swoosh, which just looks dynamic, it suggests movement. That's perfect for an activewear brand. We've got the Converse logo here, which has got an arrow, so again that's kind of movement, direction, it's going places. The Etnies as well, we've kind of got a little arrow here. Then we've got logos like Supra here, who use a crown, which is a very easily recognised symbol, and it also represents things like authority, power, I think kind of high ends and quality as well. So it's quite a confident, strong vibe it's trying to give off there. Another reason why a lot of these brands have got a strong icon element to them is that it's going to look good on their products. An icon is a lot more compact, so it's a bit easier to fit on something like a shoe or a t-shirt. It takes up much less space than, say, a fully typed logo. It's also a little bit more subtle and aesthetically pleasing than having, say, a full name typed across a t-shirt or a shoe. So to borrow some of the brand equity, the easily recognisable visual elements from this market, we'd probably be thinking about using strong, bold typefaces, kind of giving a sense of movement and direction, and also having a strong accompanying icon that could be used on its own. Now that we've got a good idea of what GU's brand positioning is, we can start to sketch out some ideas. Now in the real world, we would usually have a bit more time to work on a logo design, kind of refining it and trying out different ideas. We've got slightly more limited time for the sake of this video. So I've just started by kind of drawing these little swooshy lines to get a sense of dynamism and movement, and it's quite simple, so this is reflecting the no fuss aspect of the brand. The only downside is that we don't really want to get Nike's lawyers knocking on the door saying, you know, that looks kind of familiar, so we might want to adapt that slightly. However, I do want to keep using these kind of flowing lines and the dips and the curves, mainly because if we start thinking about what skate parks look like, you can see that they're all based around these curves and dips, these flowing lines, and that's something that we could use to associate it with skate culture. I think it's also important to have a kind of curvy, flowing icon design, because it'd be a shame not to take advantage of the natural curves found in the J and the U in the actual text GU itself. In this design, I've just tried seeing if I can expand on that slightly by adding these little curls to the end, but I think it starts to make it look a little bit too fussy and not really that attractive, so kind of moved away from that. So I've gone back to these little curvy lines and I've tried modifying it by adding a few more curves, which doesn't really look right, but then this started to remind me of the really typically stylized clouds that you see in a lot of East Asian art, so in a lot of Japanese and Chinese art, and again that ties in with the Japanese name of the brand, and this got me thinking that a cloud design would actually work really well for the icon here because it represents movement, it's kind of light, it's minimalist, it looks Japanese. GU means freedom in Japanese. The whole idea of the sky is often associated with freedom, the idea of free as a bird, and in skate culture as well, a lot of skateboarding as a sport is involved around leaps and jumps and how high you can get, and a lot of photos show skateboarders kind of mid-jump, mid-air, so it seems to time with that quite well, and it keeps all these lovely little curves that reflect the type and also the curves and dips of the skate park. Now that we've got a concept that we're happy with for the icon design, we now need to work on the typeface. In Illustrator, I've refined and vectorized the little cloud icon and decided that Bison Bold Italic would be the best typeface to use. The reason we've gone for the italic typeface is that because it's at a slight angle, it gives it a sense of direction and movement, which is something we want to convey. And if we compare this to the logo done in the regular typeface, you can see it still looks very bold and dramatic, but it just looks very static by comparison. You can also see here we've done versions in the light typeface, and we've altered the cloud icon just to match the line width of the text a little bit better. And it still looks nice, but it just looks a little bit too delicate and doesn't really stand out. For a skate shoe brand, you want something bold and chunky, and it's also what the brand defines as wanting as well. We've also tried it in the outline font, which looks a little bit chunkier than the lightweight version, but again, it just feels a little bit empty. It hasn't really got any weight or boldness to it, which is what the brand want. So this wouldn't really work for the main logo, but the nice thing about this is that it could be used perhaps in a watermark style, or if you wanted to subtly include it somewhere in the background. So it's nice that with this typeset, you do have the option to do something like that as well. We decided to position the cloud icon above the U, firstly because it's a cloud, it feels more natural for it to be higher up, like it's in the air, give it that sense of lightness and freedom, and also because normally the U would have an accent across the top, and we're using kind of the cloud and the bottom line of it here to act as that accent line in a more subtle, aesthetically pleasing way. So now that we have a completed design for the GU logo, let's see how it sits amongst its competitors. Coming back to our skate brand logos from earlier and taking into account the bold, strong typefaces and the icon elements of them, our GU logos should, fingers crossed, look fairly well placed amongst them. So hopefully there are enough similar characteristics in the bold typeface and the icon that it's easy to associate this as another skate shoe brand, but it has enough difference to make it stand out on its own. So this cloud icon I think is quite different to a lot of the other logos. So that's quite a nice way of kind of separating them slightly from the competition. Hopefully the target market will also recognise this and they'll see this new brand and think that looks pretty cool. It looks like a lot of other skate brands that I like. I'd happily wear a shoe with that logo on it. Now that we have our logo, we also need people to see it, so let's get that into a magazine advert for our client. I think when you're working on branding and logo designs as well, it's always just a nice thing to do to give an example of how it could be used in context. For the advert design, we still want to take into consideration 3 keywords that the brand wanted to come across as. So that was bold, dynamic, no fuss. The image is very bold and striking. It's kind of dark for this dramatic lighting. We've got a guy here who's kind of mid-skate, so it's quite dynamic. He's got his arms out for balance and no fuss. It's a very simple, straightforward image. We've still got, you can see the setup lights here, so it all feels kind of very practical and nothing pretentious about it. We've also used the logo type Bison bold italic for our headline here, and what we've done is just extend the base of the E into the F to emphasize that idea of flow. So this is quite a nice example of how you can be quite playful with typefaces to make them kind of a bit more visual and image-like to get a certain message across. Here in the bottom left we've got our little strap line, and that's done in a new typeface that's just been released called Buffalo, that's been specifically designed to work with Bison. So that just gives you even more options by having a whole new font family that's designed to complement the one that we're already using. Again, like the Bison font, it comes in different weights, and that's really useful for establishing an informational hierarchy. We've got our strapline here in a slightly bolder text, and we've got our fictional website in the lighter typeface just to show that that's kind of secondary information. So there we have it. Hopefully that gives you some insight into the process behind coming up with a logo design, albeit in a very condensed manner, and how having a good typeface set is such a useful tool in branding. The typeface that you've used in your logo can also be used in headlines, in all other supporting materials, and it just gives you that visual cohesion which is vital when you're establishing the look and feel of the brand. I hope you have lots of opportunities to use it. The Bison font family by Ellen Luff, now available in the Design Cuts marketplace.